Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated World of Warcraft Classic. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and thank you for joining me for our weekly Way Back Wednesday edition of the show, where we cover off on the lore or history of one piece of content from vanilla World of Warcraft. The first 30 minutes or so of this show will be a collation of information that you can find already at the amazing WoW Wiki and Wowpedia websites. However, if you're not much of a lore buff, then please feel free to skip ahead to the second half of the episode, where we'll go through community reactions to the content from back in the day. Now, let's get straight into things with a scoop of vanilla. Warsong Gulch is a battleground nestled in the southern region of Ashenvale Forest. Ashenvale being a contested zone where a lot of skirmishing goes on throughout the woods, and attacks on faction-based settlements are not uncommon. The zone is a major travel hub for both Horde and Alliance, even at higher levels. In-game, Warsong Gulch operates as a 10-on-10 capture the flag battleground. Each side tries to take the opponent's flag and cap or score that flag at their own base. You can only cap the flag if the enemy isn't carrying yours. The winner is the first team to achieve 3 caps. The official description of Warsong Gulch from Blizzard goes as follows. The gleaming purple and emerald forests of Ashenvale are more than just pleasant woodland. To the Warsong orcs who name themselves Outriders, they're a prize cache of building planks. To the Night Elf and Silverwing Sentinels, they're home. Where the turned soil and tree stumps surrounding Horde lumber mills start to encroach on Ashenvale's timberlands, these two factions clash. Each group recruits heroes from far and wide, the Horde to batter back the defenders and clear the forests, and the Alliance to shatter the aggressors and to stop the disappearance of their precious land. Capturing flags might seem like an unorthodox method of settling this dispute, but it's symbolic and hardly without bloodshed. Whoever holds their defeated foe's banner will show all who look upon the forest that their claim is the strongest, and dictate the future of one of the most important ancestral lands of the Calderay. I used to say Calderai, but now I'm going with Calderay. I think that's the right way to do it. Anyway, that's the brief summary of Warsong Gulch. But as you know from previous episodes of Countdown to Classic, what we do here is we actually get quite specific when it comes to the lore. And so we ask ourselves, where do we begin? Well, we just heard the location of Ashenvale get dropped, and we heard something about Warsong Orcs and Silverwing Sentinels and all of that jazz. So how about we start with just a bit of history of Ashenvale itself, so you get to know this area a little bit more and why it means so much to a certain race. Ashenvale, also known as Ashenvale Forest, is a wilderness region south of Darkshore and Fellwood, west of Azshara, and north of the Stone Talon Mountains and the Barrens. Ashenvale is also the term used for the larger forested region, which includes most of Western Hyjal, including Azshara. The region is quite large, and running from the Zoram Strand to the Warsong Lumber Camp is quite an undertaking. It is the ancestral homeland of the Night Elves, who remain in control of several holdings throughout the zone, including Astronar, Maestra's Post, Silverwind Refuge, Silverwing Grove, and the Shrine of Aecina. Ashenvale is an ancient forest and has been in the caring hands of the Night Elves for thousands of years. After the sundering of the ancient Kalimdor, the Night Elven civilization was built in and around the forest of Ashenvale. Ashenvale is a vast primordial wilderness, long given over to beasts and nature's savage ways. The Night Elves who settled on Kalimdor after the sundering hunted in Ashenvale's wilds, but never actually settled within its borders. Ashenvale is under the protection of ancients, being demigod-like trees, and the Night Elf Sentinels. Neither had established a community as such within the forest, though, preferring to leave the vast woodlands in its natural state. The Ancients and Night Elf Sentinels guard Ashenvale zealously, with constant patrols. Any who threaten the forest, cutting down live trees, poaching beasts of the forest and the like, are met with the Ancients' powerful attacks and the Sentinels' deadly arrows. As the Night Elves kept watch over the forest area of Ashenvale, some time passed, and eventually a new race arrived on Azeroth. The Orcs, who originated on the planet Draenor. Now, I say Draenor, some people say Draenor, and there's a very funny video on YouTube. If you literally just Google how do you pronounce Warlords of Draenor, very, very funny compilation that someone's put up from all the Blizzard staff essentially getting it wrong amongst themselves. Well, actually, no, it was just Chris Metzen who continuously said Draenor, and everyone else says Draenor, so I'm going with Draenor. But anyway, under the deception of demons, the Orcs had changed from a shamanic society into the bloodthirsty horde. They waged war upon the humans of the Eastern Kingdoms and killed countless other creatures during the First and Second Wars. The Night Elves did not emerge from their seclusion to intervene, for they knew nothing of any events that occurred outside Kalimdor. The Second War ended badly for the Orcs, and the horde was shattered. Just before the Third War, a new Orc war chief emerged, Thrall, who reformed the horde and led his people across the sea to establish their own homeland on Kalimdor. The horde eventually began to seep into Ashenvale from the relatively nearby Orgrimmar, with thoughts of expanding the lands under their control. A group of goblins, following one Nelock Greedyfingers, had started deforesting the area before the Warsong Clan arrived, but were prevented from doing much damage by the local Furbolg tribe. The Orcs acquired the goblins' aid after ending this threat. The Night Elf Sentinels took notice of the Orcish activity and reported the strangers to Tyrande Whisperwind, General of the Night Elf Sentinels and High Priestess of Elune, the major deity worshipped by the Night Elves. Having assumed the worst, Tyrande was pleased that the Orc intruders were not demons and suspected that they were old enemies trying to escape from the plague. She initially ordered the Sentinels to observe the Orcs and their new friends, as she hoped that the refugees were simply passing through the forest in order to find new lands. She was proven wrong when this particular group of Orcs then themselves started felling Ashenvale's woods. These Orcs were known as the Warsong Outriders and were led by Gromash, or more colloquially, Grom Hellscream. Despite disagreements from Thrall and the Shamans as to the activity being conducted at Ashenvale, the Warsong Clan remained in the vicinity, continuing their deforestation to fuel the Horde's expansion. The Night Elves, in retaliation to this encroachment on their ancestral land, began a massive push to retake the forests of Ashenvale and began to focus their attention on ridding their land of the Outriders once and for all. And so, the Silverwing Sentinels answered the call and swore that they would not rest until every last Orc was defeated and cast out of Warsong Gulch. Under the direction of Tyrande Whisperwind, who would have none of this Orcish encroachment on their ancestral lands, several groups of Night Elf Sentinels banded together and attacked the Warsong. So, Just before we get into what happened during that attack, we should perhaps address in even more detail who are these two groups that we've just mentioned, the Sentinels and the Warsong. We'll start with the Warsong, and these are some very long, extensive explanations, everyone, so buckle up. The Warsong Clan is a warlike Orcish clan originally hailing from the plains of Nagrand. Roughly 800 years before the First War, the Orcs began to migrate out of Gorgrond, the mountainous region of Outland now known as the Blades Edge Mountains. The Warsong clan migrated far to the southwest, deep into Nagrand's open prairies, where they constantly had to fight against the Gorian Empire's ogres to maintain their presence in the region. The Gorian Empire was a nation-state of ogres encompassing various holdings on Draenor. Some generations of Warsongs thrived more than others. The clan had a taste for battle, but provoking the ogres too much could lead to disastrous consequences. 11 years before the First War, the Warsong were led by a bold warrior named Gromash Hellscream, and as I said, perhaps we'll just call him Grom from now on. And they engaged in constant battle with the ogres of Highmaul, the capital of the Gorian Empire. The Highmaul outnumbered the Warsongs, but Hellscream's highly mobile wolf riders used hit-and-run tactics to raid ogre settlements, eventually shattering Highmaul's hold on Nagrand and seizing much of it for themselves. They pushed the ogres back within the walls of their own stronghold, and Grom became a legend among the clans. Shortly after, Blackhand was named War Chief of the Horde, obviously Blackhand being a very key character from the very first Warcraft game, as he was the War Chief of the Horde then. He assigned specific roles to the various clans. The Warsongs were among the clans that would make up the Horde's main fighting force, leading direct assaults on Draenei settlements and forming the backbone of the Orcish army. Side note. Now, I know we just talked about the pronunciation of Draenor, and I'm going with Draenor, but what about Draenei? Do some people say Draenei? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going with Draenei. Anyway, back to the story. Later on, Blackhand tasked the Warsong and Twilight's Hammer clans with toppling Highmaul. Grom and Cho'Gall, a powerful ogre mage who was exiled from Highmaul and became chieftain of the Twilight's Hammer clan, both took part in the siege and both relished the opportunity to slay ogres. After the Horde had conquered much of Draenor, the threat of starvation caused the Orcs to hunt most of Draenor's native creatures to extinction. The Warsong raiders turned on their own wolf mounts and used them as a source of food. The famine also caused many orcs to grow more agitated and turn on each other, clashing in short-lived battles that left hundreds dead. Several clans, among them the Warsongs, completely lost themselves to the depths of madness. To protect the rest of the Horde, Blackhand banished the violent clans from Hellfire Citadel, the headquarters of the Fell Orcs of Outland, to the remote areas of Hellfire Peninsula, the area in Outland where the other side of the Dark Portal was. The Dark Portal being one of the two gateway portals that teleport between Azeroth and Draenor. Blackhand did so simply in order to preserve some of the Horde's dwindling strength. When the Horde prepared to invade Azeroth in the lead-up to the First War, Blackhand ordered the troublesome clans to remain on Draenor, since he believed that they would become liabilities if allowed to participate in the invasion. He knew that the clans would grow restless on Draenor, but a few months of waiting while hearing only stories of the lush new world and seeing only scraps of the war spoils would force them to be on their best behaviour. If the clans were still uncontrollable, They could stay on Draenor and rot for all Blackhand cared. After the fall of Stormwind City, the new war chief, Orgrim Doomhammer, sent messages to Draenor to call up the remaining clans in order to replenish the Horde's numbers. But the messengers later returned to inform the war chief that the clans on Draenor had descended deeper into bloodlust and had begun fighting with one another, allowing only a few orcs and ogres to bolster the Horde. Life on Draenor was stark for Draenor's orcs, as the world continued to die and the orcs continued being consumed by bloodlust and violence. The Warsong and Shattered Hand clans, in particular, had insatiable needs for violence. Following the Horde's defeat on Azeroth at the end of the Second War, Ner'zhul, the Elder Shaman war chief of Draenor, rallied the clans still left on Draenor, the Warsongs being amongst them, under his new banner with the intent of opening portals to new worlds for the Horde to conquer. The gathered chieftains easily agreed to Ner'zhul's plans, having sat out the entirety of the First and Second Wars. They thirsted for battle, and any chance to escape their dying homeworld was worth taking. Almost immediately after Ner'zhul reopened the Dark Portal, Grom led the Warsong, Shattered Hand, Thunderlord, and Laughing Skull clans in an invasion of the Blasted Lands, the area of the Eastern Kingdoms to the east of Stranglethorn Vale, where the Orcish Horde first entered Azeroth through the Dark Portal. Taron Gorefiend, one of Gul'dan's followers and a member of the Shadow Council, a group of mortal warlocks that serve the demons of the Burning Legion, led a group of orcs and death knights away from the Blasted Lands in search of the artifacts that would allow Ner'zhul to open portals to new worlds. When Gorefiend prepared to return to Draenor with the artifacts, he left behind a large number of soldiers, mainly composed of Hellscream's Warsong orcs, as well as Rexxar, a member of the Mok'Thonol clan which consists of mostly half-ogres/half-orcs, to defend the Azerothian side of the Dark Portal from a potential Alliance invasion. When the Alliance did launch their invasion, the Sons of Lothar, a group of Alliance warriors mostly made up of veterans of the Second War, smashed through Hellscream's warriors and forced them to scatter into the far corners of the Blasted Lands. Possession of the Dark Portal then switched sides on several occasions, and the Warsong were forced to retreat to a neighbouring valley for periods of time. When the news later came that Draenor had been destroyed by Ner'zhul's reckless magic, Grom was devastated, for his only remaining family, his son, Garrosh, had still been on Draenor. Grom put aside his grief and led the Warsong Clan north to take shelter in the Swamp of Sorrows, in the southern part of the Eastern Kingdoms. He was not giving up, merely regrouping. He believed that there would never be peace between orcs and humans, and he wanted his fighters to be ready for battle. While many of the orcs were captured by the Alliance and placed in internment camps, Grom and the Warsong managed to evade capture, travelling to the wilds of Lordaeron. Despite being constantly hunted by humans, Hellscream held on to the Horde's unquenchable will to fight. He and his devoted Warsong continued to wage an underground war against the oppression of the orcs, but they never found a way to rouse the captured orcs from their stupor. Thrall, a young orc raised in an internment camp, sought out Grom and was inspired by the chieftain's idealism. Together with the former war chief Orgrim Doomhammer, Thrall set about liberating the orcs from the internment camps and revitalizing the Horde. Encouraged by his best friend and mentor, Grom, Thrall worked to ensure that his people would never be slaves again. One day Thrall was instructed by Medivh, the last guardian of Tirisfal, an ancient line of protectors of Azeroth, to sail west away from Lordaeron to the continent of Kalimdor. While Thrall was assembling the Orcish clans, Grom and the Warsong were captured by the Alliance and placed in a naval base. Before long, Thrall's forces freed the imprisoned Warsong and set sail across the ocean. However, During the voyage, the Warsong was separated from the rest of the horde, and there was no sign of Grom's forces during that initial landfall on Kalimdor. Though, a party of Warsong warriors and several catapults managed to find Thrall's forces shortly thereafter. When the Warsong were finally found, they were in the process of battling the human forces under Jaina Proudmoore's command, Jaina Proudmoore being a powerful human sorceress and the daughter of the Supreme Commander of the Alliance's naval forces, Grand Admiral Dalen Proudmoore. Grom directly disobeyed Thrall's orders by continuing to attack the humans, leading the war chief to instead send the Warsong north to construct a settlement while the main force journeyed to Stone Talon Peak in search of the mysterious Oracle. Once in Ashenvale, the Warsong intended to claim the lumber resources of the forest. From their labour and lumber camps, the main forces of the Warsong began logging operations. But, in their warring zeal, they cut even more wood than they could possibly use, leaving it to rot while their blades bit into fresh trees. This activity drew the attention of the inhabitants of Ashenvale, the Night Elves, who then decided to rid the land of these orcish invaders. But before we move on to who those Night Elves were, what was the culture of the Warsong? On Draenor, the Warsong roamed the prairies of Nagrand as nomads, rarely staying in the same place for more than a few months. The riders of the Warsong were always on the move. In camp, a family's tent was marked with a long pike thrust into the ground, often adorned with the skulls of defeated enemies and sometimes branded with the names of key battles. Relying on shock and awe to overwhelm their enemies, the Warsong earned their name from their fearsome battle cries and thunderous drum marches. Ripping into every combat, crying epic battle hymns of blood and death, they were the most distinguishable of the Draenor clans. A bull roarer is an arm-length piece of rigid wood affixed to the end of a long rope and spun over the wielder's head to generate a droning noise capable of travelling long distances. The bull roarers used by the Warsong were grooved to emit a high-pitched whistling noise rather than the low hum used by most other clans. To earn the status of Wolf Rider, a Warsong had to go through a series of arduous trials. To prove themselves worthy of the wolf, the orc had to first test their strength and tenacity by gathering a heavy stone from a quarry and carrying it on their back into the lands of their enemy. After cutting their way through the enemy's ranks, the orc was to place the stone in a place of prominence and set it upon a trophy of their foe in order to display their strength for all to see. Once the display of strength was completed, the orc had to head to the wolves' hunting grounds and subdue the largest member of the pack in the presence of the beast's kin. If they survived the ordeal, the wolf would answer to the orc as its new master. Finally, the Warsong believed that it was not enough for a wolf to regard an orc as its master. Instead, to ready the beast for riding, its will had to be broken completely. Once the aspiring wolf rider had subdued their beast, they would mount it and ride it to the top of the tallest peak in Nagrand. If the wolf was willful, the orc would be thrown to their death on the mountain slopes. But if they survived, the will of their mount would have been successfully broken. Then the orc could finally call themselves a wolf rider. It is expected that members of the Warsong wear the bones of his or her first kill and inscribe them with personal runes. Members of the Warsong long hunted the blood-hoof cleft hoof to use their crimson-hued skin for battle standards. So, that's the Warsong covered off, but now we turn to the other half of the equation, and those night elves that were roused by the actions of the Warsong. Who were they? Well, the Sentinels, or the Sentinel Army, are the primary military arm of the Night Elf race. Founded in the years following the War of the Ancients and the destruction of the old Calderae Empire, the Sentinels serve as Darnassus's army in its engagements throughout Kalimdor and beyond. The organisation is composed of devout and well-trained warrior women, with strong ties to the Sisterhood of Elune. In the wake of its war with the Burning Legion, High Priestess Taronda Whisperwind led the Night Elf race, and particularly the Sisterhood, in rebuilding their ruined society. Her order was uniquely poised to fill a power vacuum as a result of their numbers and influence, and Taronda soon took advantage of this. From the ranks of the Sisterhood of Elune, she forged the Sentinels, whose duty it was to protect their newly emergent society. Quickly cementing itself in this role, the Sentinels established themselves as the fledgling Night Elf nation's primary agents and guardians. In the millennia to come, the Sentinels would take part in many conflicts on behalf of Darnassus, most immediately the brutal War of the Satyr. And I must thank my fellow podcast host on The Cinephiles, Liam, for pointing out to me after he listened to Countdown to Classic that I used to say satyr, but it's actually pronounced satyr, I believe. The Sentinels' largest base of operations outside of Darnassus was at Feathermoon Stronghold in Feralus, and they used night sabers as both ground transport and a heavy weapon. The Sentinels were established approximately 600 years after the War of the Ancients, which was a major conflict which constituted the first coming of the demonic Burning Legion in Azeroth, 10,000 years prior to the events of the First War. Until recently, all of its soldiers were Night Elf women. However, the Third War resulted in so many casualties that the traditional gender roles of Night Elf society had been set aside in favour of more practical concerns. As a result, although the Sentinels are still primarily women, there are now also men amongst their ranks. The Sentinels are courageous and selfless soldiers whose only goal for the last 10 millennia has been to defend the Night Elf people. New recruits undergo extensive training, and, as time permits, the more experienced warriors undergo frequent combat drills. The Third War resulted in many losses for the Sentinels, but the army still boasts a number of battle-hardened veterans. Like Taronda and Chandris themselves, there are still plenty of Sentinels in active service that experienced the War of the Ancients. By the time of the Great Sundering, a cataclysmic event that shattered the continent of Kalimdor approximately 10,000 years ago at the end of the War of the Ancients, military service for the Night Elves had become more a matter of bloodline than ability. Almost all high-ranking officers were nobles, and the Night Elves had lived in peace for so long that very few of those officers, however privileged and well-educated, possessed even a basic knowledge of tactics. Joining the army, once a selfless choice to defend the Night Elf people, had been reduced to a status symbol. The War of the Ancients made the army's deterioration all too clear. After the Night Elves and their allies had achieved victory, High Priestess Taronda Whisperwind decreed sweeping changes throughout Night Elf society. The Sisterhood of Elune, an order of priestesses dedicated to the worship and servitude of the moon goddess Elune and the oldest Night Elf religious and magical order, was one of the few major organizations to survive the war largely intact, and membership in its ranks had never been a matter of bloodline. Furthermore, members of the order had trained extensively in combat, tactics, and healing. Yet in spite of all their knowledge and experiences, the priestesses had become somewhat distant from the rest of Night Elf society. Taronda believed that this distance was partly to blame for the cataclysmic war, and she resolved that her order would take up the duty of directing the Sentinels. Never again would the Sisters of Elune fail to guide the Night Elf people. These warrior women practice both the art of combat as well as that of healing and life-giving in the name of Elune. The Sentinels are considered the elite fighters amongst the Night Elves. They favour moonglaves in battle. Moonglaves are a three-bladed weapon which can be used either in melee or as a thrown weapon. A skilled user can gain feats to ricochet the weapon off opponents and back into their hands. The Sentinels are led by the Priestesses of the Moon under the High Priestess Tyrande Whisperwind and her lieutenant Chandris Feathermoon. The Sentinels are comprised of elite Night Elf archers, a cavalry division known as the Huntresses who ride the feral Night Saber Panthers, and the mighty Hippogriff Riders who assault enemies from the air. Sentinels are found in many Night Elf villages in World of Warcraft, as well as many other races. The Sentinels revere the Moonwells, an upwelling of magical waters created by the Night Elves to maintain and restore their magical powers as shrines to Elune. 975 years before the First War, the Sentinels, along with other units, rallied under Fandral Steghelm in Silithus in the War of the Shifting Sands that we heard all about recently on the podcast. If you haven't heard those older episodes, please do go back and have a listen. They later fought in the Third War, working with Cenarius, a demigod worshipped by the Night Elves, Lord of the Forest and patron of all druids. They fought against the orcs of the Warsong Clan, which brings us right back to the current point of our story near Warsong Gulch. As the Night Elves looked into the orcish incursion on their ancient lands, Cenarius, as a being so attuned to nature that he could sense the slightest corruption, assumed that the orcs in Ashenvale were scouts of the Legion. Cenarius became certain that the orcs had returned to their warlike ways, and he led a group of Night Elves and Treants against a large group of the orcish intruders. With a sentinel force composed of the Silverwings, Shadowleaves, Nightblades, Moonhunters, and Starseekers, the Night Elf forces advanced on the orc settlements and camps. Eventually, the Nightblades destroyed a Warsong base, allowing the Shadowleaves to establish themselves in enemy territory within the destroyed base, from which they then sent periodic attacks against the Warsong Clan. This Night Elf campaign, ironically, sent the Warsong Clan back into the service of Manaroth, a pit lord and one of the favoured lieutenants of his masters, Archimonde and Kil'jaeden, the champions of the Burning Legion, and led to the re-establishment of their connection to the potent fell magics that first bound them to the Legion. Led by Hellscream, the orcs drank of a pool's tainted waters and revelled in the return of their demon-granted power. Grom transformed into a Chaos Orc, and overcome with supernatural hate and rage, he and his warriors retaliated against Cenarius and his allies. Ultimately, the orcs succeeded in killing the demigod. Manaroth appeared before Hellscream and his troops moments later and enslaved them, since by drinking his blood, they had made themselves susceptible to his control once again. The Shadowleaf Sentinels, led by Chandris Feathermoon, returned to report with sorrow that Cenarius had been murdered by the green-skinned invaders. Tyrande gathered her sentinels once again as she sensed a growing evil. Chandris, in council, suggested that perhaps it was the orcs, but still, Tyrande was still uneasily aware that there was a darker power hiding in the shadows. The Night Elves and many other creatures mourned Cenarius' tragic death, including Ysera, the Green Dragon aspect and watcher over Azeroth. She was known as the mother of Cenarius, but since she is a dragon, this is not literal, it's more just a loving term. The death of Cenarius at the hands of the orcs, demon-tainted or not, enraged the Night Elves, cementing their view of the savage, green-skinned, although red-skinned at that moment, creatures as their enemies. Meanwhile, Thrall, Can Bloodhoof, the High Chieftain of the United Tribes of the Tauren, and Jaina Proudmoore found the Oracle, who was revealed to be Medivh. He told the gathered leaders that Grom had fallen to demonic influence, and that he and all of the orcs would soon be lost forever. With the aid of Can and Jaina, Thrall's forces managed to lay siege to the Warsong encampment and capture Grom in a soul gem, allowing him to be purified of Manaroth's influence by priests and shaman. Together, Thrall and Grom proceeded to face and slay Manaroth in a nearby canyon in Ashenvale, finally freeing the orcs from demonic influence. But Grom was killed in the battle. The Warsong chieftain was buried in the canyon, and a monument was erected in his honour. It says, "Here lies Gromash Hellscream, chieftain of the Warsong Clan. In many ways, the curse of our people began and ended with Grom. His name meant giant's heart in our ancient tongue. He earned that name 100-fold as he stood alone before the demon Manaroth and won our freedom with his blood. Lok Tar Ogar, big brother, may the war song never fade." Written by Thrall, War Chief of the Horde. At the time of the release of World of Warcraft, in the wake of the bloodshed in Ashenvale, both Alliance and Horde forces continue to push for control of the small area now dubbed Warsong Gulch. With the Alliance and Horde races at war again in the events of World of Warcraft, the still prevalent abundance of surrounding lumber around the Warsong Gulch area would prove a boon to the supplies of both factions' war efforts. The Silverwing Sentinels have an invested interest in reclaiming their ancestral lands and driving back the Horde incursion. Meanwhile, many members of the Warsong Clan still reside in Ashenvale and have no intention of leaving anytime soon. Thus, let us battle. But with all that lore now out of the way, it's time to hear the community's reactions to Warsong Gulch with the weekly segment, That's What We Said. Each Wednesday on Countdown to Classic, I bring you a few community reactions from back in the day about the content that we've just discussed. So a few talking points for you about all things Warsong Gulch. And we begin with a Reddit comment from a user whose name has since been deleted, but that anonymous person said this. Warsong has always been and probably always will be my favourite battleground. Yeah, pugging it sucks, but go in with 3 to 4 good friends and you can carry 5 versus 10 easily. Hell, back in the day, a good friend and I would practically carry teams 2v1. Rogue plus Resto Druid, ha ha ha. Back in vanilla during the original PvP grind, 10 versus 10 with your GM team against another GM team when you weren't win trading, which was a lot of the time, was without a doubt some of the best PvP I've ever experienced in any MMO. 10 really good players against 10 really good players is just fantastic in pretty much any aspect of the game. Now, the reason I've led with that post is obviously Warsong Gulch is going to have some people who love it and some people who hate it. Which camp were you in? A, did you PvP a lot? And B, if you did, was this a go-to battleground for you? Of the 3 that we had, Warsong Gulch, Alterac Valley, Arathi Basin, which one did you gravitate towards in vanilla? This user clearly says that they had a deep love for Warsong Gulch. If you got a few really skilled people together with a bit of know-how, there was a way to absolutely kick ass in Warsong Gulch back in the day, if perhaps you had the right tactics to go along with the skill. It didn't matter that you were in a pug, you could still get the job done. Half the team being on board with what you were doing would potentially and usually be enough to get a result. And this user puts the PvP in Warsong Gulch down as the best PvP experience they've had in any MMO, which I found really quite interesting. I'm not particularly well versed in other MMOs. I played a little bit of Final Fantasy XI, a little bit of Final Fantasy XIV, things like that, but I'm not a big PvP guy. But for all of you who have PvP'd in other MMOs, would you agree with this statement? Write to me at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com and compare the PvP experiences and let me know. Say, hey Josh, actually, it really was pretty damn good. Or, no way Josh, this other game's PvP system was so much better. But now we move on to the kind of anti-Warsong Gulch camp with Reddit user Nimzita, who says this: I don't know what it is, but I'm pretty sure Warsong Gulch was the only reason I don't PvP. When I tried other battlegrounds, I had a fun time. But when I did Warsong Gulch, my lust for PvP just went away. So, it wasn't all sunshine and lollipops for Warsong Gulch. Some people legitimately hated it, and to this day rank it as one of the perhaps not so great experiences that Blizzard has done when it comes to PvP. Some people don't really like the mechanics of Warsong Gulch. Some people don't like a capture the flag system. Some people think that the layout of the geography is really not conducive to some thoughtful and wild team play. Just the ability to zerg through the middle of the field and the randomness of pugs running around like chicken with their heads cut off during the madness that is perhaps an hour and a half Warsong Gulch match was not terribly fun for some people. Some enjoyed it, in reveling in the insanity like perhaps our friend the Joker might, but some people do not like that chaos and prefer a slightly more meaningful PvP experience that they might get perhaps in something like Alterac Valley. What do you think? As I say, write to me at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com. Tell me why you loathed, hated Warsong Gulch. Did you have one bad experience there? Perhaps you felt the tactics were never achievable amongst all the pugs that went there. But with that, we move on to the next submission from a forum user named lol123, who says this: I'm the leader of a pre-made PvP group that recently got banned, and I can explain a misconception about Warsong Gulch. We were going up against another pre-made battleground group, real rankers who were gaming the system. They didn't want to waste time. They knew they couldn't beat us. We had been beating them all week. When they lose early, they just give up and dog it. It always happens. Every pre-made in Warsong Gulch. We fight for the first flag, then they give up when they lose that first flag. It's not win trading. Every EU and North American ranker can back me up. My group isn't even that strong. I mean, we're not too bad. We can beat all the pre-mades except ex-rankers. I always build these kind of pre-made groups and help them farm honor. I wish my ban would be reconsidered. And the reason I bring up that post is it touches on the notion of win trading. And obviously when people were farming honor, this was something that the player base was slightly aware of that really bothered some people. And you can find a lot of forum posts bitching about this topic. What were your thoughts on quote unquote win trading? Did you come up against it a lot when you played vanilla? Now the concept was obviously that people would lay over for one another in pre-made battlegrounds. One team would win, then another team would win, and then basically they would bump themselves up the ladder with honor. And please, listeners, if I'm getting any of this wrong, do write into the show and tell me, because as I say, I was not a big PvPer. So some of this stuff is a little bit foreign to me, and I've tried to do a bit of research on the topic. But basically, win trading is something that did come up from time to time. However, this person is saying it's a little bit of a misconception because it wasn't always win trading. Sometimes some teams would just crack the shits that they didn't get that first flag, and then basically basically roll over and stop playing, hence making it look like there had been some prearranged tactic with the other team in terms of, or unspoken tactic, I guess you could say, because you couldn't talk to each other really unless you figured something out outside of the game. But apparently people were getting banned as well when shenanigans were noticed, and they're saying it was done unfairly at times. In that, again, I say looked like win trading, but it wasn't really. It was just a team being perhaps sore losers. But either way, did you experience shenanigans in battlegrounds? I do remember back in the day, people just, one thing that used to really give me the shits is people just saying, just lose, just stop. And that's in line with this story. A lot of battleground chat would be, just stop. Let's just end this one and lose it, because that way you could get to the next match and try again and basically increase your honor per hour in a certain way. But this would often happen at times when idiots like me thought that we still had a shot, and that never say die attitude of, no way man, we can still do this. We'll come back from 2-0 down. We can do it. But I don't know. It's just something that, how do you feel about it? Were you one of those people who knew when to quit and just wanted to get to the next battleground? Let me know. But we move on to the next post from Reddit user RhodersFF, who says this. Topics like this one on the official Blizzard webpage have largely been flamed by Horde-only players or been unceremoniously ripped from the forums by the blue posters. But the problem of faction imbalances, racial imbalances, talent tree bonuses and gear stat bonuses that all favour the Horde make it hard for Alliance to win in a battleground. However, if, and it's a big if, you get into a one-on-one type of world PvP, any remotely skilled player has a 50-50 shot of winning. In my personal experience on both PvP and PvE realms as an Alliance player, I've been able to win most of the even fights, but unfortunately, most of the time solo questing on PvP servers, the Alliance is easy prey for group questing that the Horde do so often. Until Blizzard truly makes both sides equal in all respects, the Horde will continue to win in PvP. When was the last time that you saw Alliance teams dominate like the Horde? Blizzard's official answer is, we don't care. Just keep on paying your subscription, sucker, a la W.C. Fields playing Barnum and Bailey in the Ringling Brothers Circus. I guess, if that floats your boat. What that user is trying to say or trying to suggest is that there is an imbalance in PvP. There's a bit of favoritism shown here by Blizzard towards the Horde, because it seems in this player's eyes that the Horde much more often win PvP scenarios. Now, they did say one thing that you probably raised your eyebrows at as well, that when I read for the first time I went, huh? When they say, and I'll just read it again, this part, the problem of faction imbalances, racial imbalances, talent tree bonuses and gear stat bonuses that all favor the Horde. I'm right to me if I'm wrong, guys, but I'm not aware of any talent tree bonuses or gear stat bonuses that are specifically designed just for the Horde. So I think they're a little bit off there. If I'm wrong, please, by all means, let me know, but I'm not aware of that. Let's just stick to their points of what they perceive to be faction imbalances or racial imbalances. Yes, it is well known that the Horde have some pretty cool racial abilities. And, you know, something like the Undead's Will of the Forsaken obviously comes up a lot. But did you find through your experiences that Horde won more often than Alliance? Or is this person full of it and it was actually really 50-50? In my experience, I found that it was pretty much as close to 50-50 as you could get. Maybe it was a bit 45-55 in favor of Horde, but I mean, I'm clutching at straws there. I couldn't give you any figures. It's just a bit of a feeling I got, but that was mainly because I was on the Alliance side and I sucked, so I usually contributed to us losing most of the time. What this user is suggesting is that yes, when we're in a one-on-one scenario, players of equal skill, regardless of faction, it will generally be a 50-50 fight. But they're saying that when all banded together in such a situation as a 10-on-10 in Warsong Gulch, with 10 Horde players with all their really cool racials and things like that, they actually had the advantage, and that Blizzard has shown a little bit of favoritism by giving them all this cool shit. And again, I still kind of disagree, but, you know, who knows? Maybe Blizz were screwing with us. The next point I move on to is a bit of a two-pronged one, and we start with the first of two posts, which says this. I hated Alterac Valley and Warsong Gulch. Alterac Valley because it's just a rush to the other team's general, and Warsong Gulch because it takes so fucking long. The second post, the second of three posts that I'm going to read, is this one from iPhone TV, who says this. I like Alterac Valley and Warsong Gulch. I like Warsong Gulch because of the length. Granted, I don't play very often, but when I am in that mood for a turtle fest, it can savour my appetite every once in a while. Well, as someone posted before, they're just there for the kills, so that's the reason it sucks. People go midfield for kills. It's not the point of this particular battleground. The point is to have some defense, and some people going for the flag, and really much shouldn't be going on midfield at all. Maybe that's just the first-person shooter inside of me, that you never stay midfield because the longer you're out there, the bigger target you are. You want to go across unseen or as quick as possible and get the flag and run. After that, you want to hope that the defense did a good job and your flag is still there when you return. I don't know how many hat tricks I've almost had only to notice that all 9 people on defense are guarding an empty flag room, while I come in with 4 to 5 defenders from the opposite side chasing me. The biggest problem with that is that the 9 people on defense should have the advantage over 4 to 6 people attacking. This match isn't meant to be a high kill or turtle match, but the match is what people make it. Long. And the third post on this point is from official forum user, Ethereal Death, who says this. Warsong Gulch is my favourite battleground. It's the closest thing to a mindless Zergoff that World of Warcraft has, which is more fun than objectives much of the time. So the reason I read out those 3 posts is it raises the following question. It talks length of time in the battleground and tactics. What were your tactics when you went through Warsong Gulch? Did you split into offensive defense? Did you run a bit of middle control? Did you all escort the flag carrier? Or did you just straight up Zerg it? Obviously, those were the main 4 sets of tactics that one would generally see in a Warsong Gulch match. So, which do you think always led to victory? Now, the one that I always saw was Zerging, because I was always in a pug. Pugs don't talk to each other. We all abuse each other and say, you're an idiot, you don't listen to instructions, even though no one's giving instructions except for maybe one guy who's on a mission. And then we all wind up in the middle, going crazy, not even trying to get the flag at times, and just being idiots. That was my experience in Warsong Gulch. But on top of that, we talked about in those posts the length of time it took to go through a Warsong Gulch match. Now, obviously this is something that was changed later on in the game, but there were no time limits initially on a Warsong Gulch match. So the typical Warsong Gulch match could last really anywhere between 30 to 90 minutes. So you see people regularly posting images from back in the day of a 90-minute Warsong Gulch match, sort of going, you didn't know our pain. This was real Warsong Gulch. This is what we enjoyed back in the day, before all your fancy timers on this battleground. But what did you think of the timing in Warsong Gulch? Did you think that they lasted too long? Is that what made you perhaps dislike the battleground? Or did you think the timing was just right, in that you would log on for a battleground when you knew you had a good hour or so to dedicate to the cause? And then that leads into the question of what does make a good battleground in terms of timing. Is it short, sharp campaigns, like perhaps a 20-odd minute battle? Or is it the incredibly long Alterac Valley type battles that go on for hours or days? Or is it something in the middle, perhaps like a Warsong Gulch or an Arathi Basin? What do you prefer? The final post I'm bringing up this week is from official forum user Juggernaut, who says this. When it comes to Warsong Gulch, I believe it would be a good idea if Blizzard were to perhaps change the look of the battleground. Maybe have it take place in Stone Talon Mountains, or in a different zone. Maybe add some debris, like destroyed goblin shredders or crashed gnome flying machines, to make the Warsong Gulch look a bit more fascinating. And I bring up that point to highlight, what the fuck? What are you talking about? Changes? What do you mean changes? That's insanity. No changes. That's a bit of a wild one. Yeah, let's just move Warsong Gulch to a different area. Fuck it. You know what? Let's just chuck it on a different continent. Forget all the lore that I just spent 45 minutes reading to you about the area. Let's just pick it up and move it. Yeah, sure. No way, buddy. You're insane. Get out of town changing battlegrounds. Anyway, that made me really angry. And you know what happens when I get angry? I want to read out angry submissions about World of Warcraft, in particular Warsong Gulch. And so that brings us to this week's edition of Anger Management. Each episode, Countdown to Classic, comes to you with some of the angriest posts that I've found in relation to the subject matter. So this week, it's all things Warsong Gulch. And we start with this submission from user Burlesque Duck, who says this. And this was their take on what Warsong Gulches were generally like. Here's what an hour and a half Warsong Gulch match looks like from the Alliance perspective. First 5 minutes, /yell, group up, stay together, all use tunnel. /yell, please buff. /BG, damn it, the Hordes are zerging us. Stick together, don't disperse. Inevitable fanning out of Alliance to look for lone players to kill rather than team effort. Horde group smashes through the tunnel like a knife through hot butter. I'm a Shaman lol has taken the Alliance flag. Druids rules has taken the Horde flag. Both flag carriers return to their own faction's flag room. Stalemate ensues. End screen. A Warlock and a Hunter are tied for most honourable kills as they just spam dots on everybody and use that sniping skill. If losing, ignore the enemy. All gather at their tunnel entrance. Stop farming the enemy graveyard for kills. If winning, try to engage the enemy in the middle of the map. Spam slows. Camp their graveyard. Report player X, he's AFK. And 1 hour later, stop fighting. Drop flag. It's 1-2, and they have the flag. Let it end quick. I'm sick of this, you noobs. Next, we have this submission from user Koopy, who says this. I got into a Warsong match once where someone had 5 Shaman all set up on the graveyard casting a ton of AoE spells, so anyone who rezzed died immediately. They had 1 flag left to go and they weren't taking it. People were saying it had been like that for at least 20 minutes. I just left and took the penalty. Finally, we have this submission from an unknown user from the official forums who says this. Warsong Gulch round, although you would think it was simple. I've never felt so angry and frustrated at players on my own team as when I play this. People all over the map, in the wrong places, fighting the wrong people, not going after the flag, not protecting the flag carrier, etc., etc. Watching yourself put in 110% over and over just to see the flag drop after being carried for an eternity amounts to masochism. And that's been anger management. And now it's time for Tidbits. Each episode, Countdown to Classic brings you a few perhaps little-known pieces of information about the subject matter. So, I'm going to tell you a few things about Warsong Gulch that either you absolutely knew and will laugh at me for even trying to educate you on, or that you perhaps didn't know. So here we go. The first one is, Warsong Gulch wasn't, as most of you know, in the game at launch. It was added in patch 1.5 on the 7th of June in 2005. Flowing on from that, did you know that twinks in the level bracket of 10 to 19 actually couldn't play Warsong Gulch until patch 1.8, which was released on the 10th of October of 2005. So all those little rogues with their Assassin's Blade couldn't do any Warsong Gulch until that time in late 2005. Finally, the last tidbit, and it's a little bit of a light segment this week, but this one's a little bit meaty, was actually brought to my attention by one of our Discord participants, Minoru. And Minoru was kind enough to point out the following. And I send my many thanks to Minoru for typing this up for me in the Discord chat. And please everyone, come and join the Discord channel if you haven't already. The link is in the show notes. Trust me, it's a great group of people and you'll have a good time. But Minoru tells me this. My memories on this may be fuzzy, but I fact-checked as best as I could. And during testing for patch 1.8, Blizzard was adjusting the honor level gain for low levels, as well as figuring out whether Warsong Gulch should be opened for the level 10 to 19 bracket. They opened up the public test realms with these changes and announced a contest. The PTR players who would get the most honor for the 10 to 19 Warsong Gulch bracket for the duration of the testing period would get the opportunity to play some matches against Blizzard employees. The ultimate victors were the guild, when in doubt, AFK out. As promised, the players got to play a few rounds of Warsong Gulch against Blizzard employees. The first two matches were nothing special, and they played the game seriously. The players were told, however, that the third match was going to get a little silly. As they marched onto the field, they were indeed met with zaniness. Some of their foes grew to gigantic sizes. One was tiny, barely visible. A few were running at super speed, unable to be caught. At some point, tiny insects called dupe bugs were being summoned into the battlefield and slaughtered en masse. Doomlord Kazakh and a few sons of Aragorn decided to visit as well and wreak havoc. In short, there was chaos. And I do highly recommend that you go and YouTube this because it is available. I believe it's under the term Players versus Blizzard or something of that nature. If you Google around Warsong Gulch, I'm sure you'll find it. I'll try and put the link somewhere where you can find it. It's definitely in our Discord channel if you want to come and check that out. But that's been Tidbits for the week, everyone. So, and really, that's been the show. But just before you go, I want to do a few show notes and shout outs and a little bit of what's to come. In terms of show news, this Friday, so in 2 days' time, I'm releasing a breakdown, a very fun, tongue-in-cheek breakdown of the Warcraft movie. So this will be the first edition of a Friday episode of Countdown to Classic. Now, the Friday episodes moving forward will all be interviews, but I recently covered the Warcraft movie for my other podcast, The Cinephiles, and you can find us at cinephiles.com. That's SINNERFILES. And the reason we did that is we wanted to do something for you guys. We thought you might actually get a kick out of it. So even though it's not technically World of Warcraft related or vanilla related or classic related in any way, shape or form, in a way, well, I guess the lore is there, but you know what I mean. If you're interested in hearing, three guys laugh and chat about the Warcraft movie for about an hour or so, then please do download and listen to Friday's episode. Even if you're not interested, in fact, in the Warcraft movie, can you just download it anyway for me and not listen? That would be great. But just letting you know that that will be this Friday. Now, I've got lots of interviews lined up. It looks as though those Friday episodes are really going to be a bit of a go in terms of the interview department. Now, none of you wrote to me and said, no, Josh, don't do 3 episodes per week. It's too much. So, I'm very much so going to be doing 3 episodes per week. And I've already done 2 interviews and they're fantastic and I can't wait to bring them to you. And just today, I'm pretty sure I secured 3 more from players of the game who I'm really excited to talk to. One of them's a YouTuber, one of them was a guild leader, and another is a little bit of a perhaps special guest. But don't get too excited, but they might be a bit of fun. But anyway, with all that done, I just want to do a couple of shout-outs. Now, first shout-out, quick one, to Discord user Fizzy. And I'm really sorry I forgot to read out your short story on the last episode, but Fizzy wrote to me in Discord and said this: I've got a semi-funny story, Josh, on K3. This shaman kept stealing the centaur kills in the Barrens, so I challenged him to a duel. I killed him as the mobs respawned, just to let a mob aggro onto him and finish him off as I laughed at him. And, of course, revenge is a dish best served publicly, I guess, as I read that story out to the world. Thank you for sending that in to me, Fizzy. Now, the next shout out is a special one for another Discord user. And you'll see a trend here, guys. If you're in the Discord channel and you ask me something, I'm probably more likely to read it out on the show. So jump in and have a go. But this is for Discord user Ianitis. And I'll read the following in Ianitis' words, who says this. I'd like to give a shout out to my girlfriend and the love of my life, Lexi, with a reminder that no, clicking is not as efficient as key binding. Aww, I'm always going to do stuff in the name of love. That's touching, Ianitis. And hello, Lexi. Thank you for listening to the show. Hope you're enjoying it. And I hope that you enjoyed that shout out despite the little crack at the end. Now, another shout out. Look at this yet again from Discord. And this one comes from Grogor, or Nick from Denmark, who says, Hey Josh, a shout out from a big Danish fan of yours. I absolutely love your podcast, which I usually hear when I drive to work. Thanks a lot, buddy. P.S. I'm trying to see if I get time to write you a good old PvP story for one of your future Memory Lane episodes. Have an awesome day. And I say, thank you, Nick. I hope you have an awesome day. And thank you so much for writing me a Memory Lane submission. That's exactly the kind of thing that I need for that segment. And all of you should take note. Please be like Nick. Write to me with some Memory Lane submissions. And I'm very thankful that after Monday's episode, when I implored you for more submissions after we didn't get any last week, I did get quite a few. So thank you to everyone that wrote into me. And we should be fine for Memory Lane this week, but keep sending them in regardless. Anyway, I've got one last shout out for the week, and this is a very thoughtful email that a very special listener wrote to me through the week. And this came from Brandon on Twitter, who you might remember is the person who actually designed the show's logo. That lovely, lovely logo that you see every time you download an episode or every time you see me on Twitter. That was Brandon's work. And you can find him on Twitter at BN The Wilderness. That's B for Bob, N for Nelly, The Wilderness. So, Brandon writes the following, and it's a slightly long email, but he's got a really good point. So I just want you to listen to this and listen up to what my response will be. Hey Josh, love that you brought up the discussion about quest markers in episode 13. Here are my thoughts on questing in vanilla versus questing in live, regarding the map markers and breadcrumbs. When WoW first came out, we were all quite a bit younger in our days, and MMOs were still somewhat of a new concept that hadn't reached the masses yet. So the idea of a map system that showed you where to go to turn in and complete quests was always something that I felt I needed in the game. So when WoW introduced the map markers for the quests, I thought it was amazing. Finally, something to help me enjoy the game more. However, I began to notice my interest in the quests and exploring the world deteriorated as time went on. The game started to feel more like a chore. Log on, follow the breadcrumbs, kill the mobs at the end of the breadcrumbs, go back to your quest giver, turn it in, rinse and repeat. Now, I know this is essentially what we do anyway, but without the quest markers on the mini-map, we allowed ourselves to get lost in the world. The monotony of the quest grind is broken up by stumbling on new things and discovering interesting locations that are maybe outside of our level. A sort of sneak peek to what we'll be doing next, and of course maybe we stumbled into the wrong area and got ourselves killed because we were lobies. The world seems to grow in size and becomes more interesting all because we have that ability to get lost and discovering new things at our own pace. I'm all for going back to the old days without the quest markers because I want to be able to get lost, discover the world again, and try to figure things out for myself or even reach out to the community and get some help. I believe it helps build up the community on your server. Say when you absolutely can't find where you have to go next, then you reach out to others in-game. Maybe you join a party and others help guide you to where you have to go next. Before you know it, you have a new friend. Almost all modern MMOs and games these days tend to tell you where to go. The open worlds feel a lot smaller and a quicker experience than games of old. For example, Skyrim and The Witcher 3. I love both of those games, but the map system takes the getting lost experience away slightly. Recently I played Zelda Breath of the Wild and decided to turn off all HUDs to discover the world at my own pace. I ended up playing the game for over 100 hours and not even discovering everything it has to offer yet. It was absolutely exhilarating. Hyrule felt so alive and there were so many interesting things tucked away that I never would have discovered if I were going from point A to point B just to finish the quest. So, I think in my older age I've become a slower gamer, meaning I have the patience now and don't mind taking my time to get to the end game. To me, it's all about the importance of the journey, making a few new friends along the way and maybe a few enemies to help build your own story in the world of Warcraft. I'd love to hear more of what your thoughts are on this. Do you happen to have more patience now for a slower WoW experience? And thank you very much for that very thoughtful message, Brandon. And I will answer your question very, very quickly just before we go. My answer is that yes, I do have more patience now. Mainly because, of course, I am getting older. I'm in my mid-30s now. I'm 35 years old. I have the patience. However, it's funny that in life in general, I find that myself, like probably most of you, very much so wants things quicker. With modern technology coming along and all the apps at our disposal and things of that nature, I want it all now. Give me my pizza now with ease. I want my breakfast this morning delivered now with ease. Let's do some banking now with ease. We're living in a society now where we can do everything faster than we ever have been able to in the past. However, that obviously causes quite the conundrum with video games. And video games are very much so switching to this go, easy mode, let's knock it all out very quickly kind of experience. In a way, if you know what I mean. Obviously, there are still long games out there, but there are some shortcuts being taken along the way. However, with World of Warcraft, I feel quite the opposite about things. I very much so enjoy the slow burn, which is why I probably liked Vanilla WoW as much as I did. And I talked to you in the last episode about how much I loved travel. I enjoyed going 10, 15, 20 minutes from point to point. That was part of this huge world that I was within, and you've touched on that in your point. But yes, I absolutely enjoy that. I've dived back into retail lately, as I've told you all on the show, and the one thing that has really grabbed me is the incredible pace at which the game now works. It's WoW on crack. The accelerator has been pushed down. It's pedal to the metal, baby. And I am flying at 1,000 miles per hour going, holy shit, I can't believe I'm level 30 already. I just started playing. And one of the biggest points for me was when I hit level 20 and literally had an achievement come up and an item placed in my bag of, here's your fell steed, because I was playing a warlock. Here's your fell steed in your bags, ready to summon. Thanks for coming. I didn't even have to go to town to buy one. It was just given to me in the middle of a field in Westfall, and I couldn't believe it. It kind of bummed me out. I don't like that. I like old, slow progression. I like to run to town to sell my shit. I like to run to town to get new things like mounts and things like that. I don't just want the game to bring them to me automatically and take shortcuts. So yes, I do still have the patience for that, and I crave it. So I hope that answers your question, Brandon, and thank you so much again for writing in. And of course, anyone who designs the logo of the show for free is going to get their submission read out on the show virtually without question. And that, everyone, is the episode for the day. So I can't wait to bring the first Friday episode to you. Look out for that in 48 hours. Thanks very much for everything. Hope you've had fun. See you later.